Future of Golf podcast, where we speak to the brightest minds of golf every single week. This week, I am glad to be joined by a Bostonian. I've had a lot of great memories in Boston as an Irishman. Always tend to get treated very well over there. And we are joined by Sean Bleyl, who is representing Members First on their client side of things. So Members First is it's fair to say, an all-encompassing platform covering a huge amount of private clubs and country clubs, everything to do with membership, tee sheet software, and everything in between. But I'll leave you to tell the spiel on that, Sean. But first of all, how are you? Great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. I appreciate you having me here. It's been fun following your content and the evolution of Handicaddy. So it's really cool to finally meet you in person virtually, I guess.
Absolutely. And we did have a go with the podcast the other day, but the Boston weather wasn't holding up too well for Sean. With some pretty intense winds. I think we're both getting it pretty rough. Me being in Ireland and you being on the other side, it's quite rough. I'm
I
sure
know.
the
I thought you might have jinxed the recording because we were getting weather like you probably normally have. And it was really interesting. Yeah, I lost power a couple times on Monday, which is very kind of rare, this time of year here. But I'm going to throw you a little curveball here, Graham. So even though I live in Boston, I'm originally from New York. So I am a New York Yankees fan, which most of my friends here in Boston don't really appreciate, except this year when we were both in the bottom of the barrel.
Not a fan, yeah, exactly. It's like the other side of the pond version of that would be a Manchester United fan living in Liverpool. That would be very uncommon. In fact, one of Manchester United's best ever players, Wayne Rooney, was a Liverpool native, and there was always controversy with him being on the other side of things. So you're living in a fine line, my man. I would watch out for your safety there.
Yeah, but you know what? It's actually been fun because for the last 20 years that I've kind of lived in the, somewhat of the Boston area, you know, us as Yankee fans, we can't live without Red Sox fans, and I think that they would actually say the same. So it's actually been a really great experience, kind of, being the competitor that I am.
Yeah, of course. And kind of staying on the topic of sports, obviously you find yourself in the golf world now, Sean, and you're fully engrossed with what's happening in Members First. But was golf your first love as a sport, or did you stumble your way into it through loving other sports first?
I kind of, I mean, I kind of stumbled my way into it. I mean, growing up in a small town just in upstate New York, I always had golf was around, right? I always remember Sunday afternoons, my father and my grandfather were always, watching golf. And of course, I didn't necessarily understand it at the time. It wasn't that exciting to me because I was outside playing, baseball, basketball, football, everything else. And played a little bit kind of, at the local municipal courses, back where I grew up, but it was never really, on my radar as
Mm,
far as like, what I would potentially do for a career. Um, then I ended up going to Western New England University, which is in Springfield, Massachusetts, and and honestly, I um, still had no interest in golf, as a career, until one of my classmates did a presentation um, in on this golf course that was newly developed. It was called the Ranch Golf Club, high end daily fee course back in the early 2000s, and he just talked about how much fun it was. And ultimately, I took a business card, which wasn't even his business card, and took that business card and I emailed it and said, "Hey, I love sports. Kind of interested in learning more."
mm,
And immediately, that person emailed me back, and he was the president of a golf development company at the time, and I was so nervous when he emailed back because I was
yeah,
like, I don't really know what to do here. But ultimately, he invited me up to that golf course for a cup of coffee, which I didn't drink at that time, and I wish that was the case now. But
yeah,
ultimately, that presentation in college piqued my interest in the world of golf, and the world of private clubs. And from that presentation, you know, during my during my college days, kind of sparked an internship at that golf course, which was owned by a golf development company. And for the next 10 years, I kind of worked in the operations world at a variety of different private clubs, daily fee clubs, resorts, and had the opportunity to work at a variety of different um, country clubs or golf clubs, and also had the opportunity to open some of those courses as well. So it was really cool to see, what goes into developing a club or a golf course. And then ultimately I just kind of fell in love with the game and the hospitality industry that is associated to it.
Isn't it crazy though that I mean you could argue that snowball of events came from one cold email that you sent from the start to send you on that path, and I think I mean even thinking back to my last year, so I was basically doing the same. I was cold emailing golf clubs just looking to get a bit of experience, and I had cold emailed this club in Scotland just outside of St Andrews, and yeah, like I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks, and then it was the caddy master, and it just so happened that he was looking for an assistant for the year. So then that sent me down the path of exploring caddy programs, and that was almost like my initial thing to set me on my path. Do you ever think about what would have been the alternative if you didn't send that email? What would have been the other path for you?
Well, so it was interesting because I gained a business degree at school, with a focus on sport management. And in my mind, at the time, sport management meant team sports. And it meant, I mean, look at where I live now. I mean, you've got the Celtics, the Bruins, the Patriots, the Revolution. You've got a variety of different team sports. So in my mind, that's what I was thinking sport management was, the business around team sports, because that's kind of what I was interested in growing up. So if I didn't fall into the golf world, um, I think the alternative probably would have been, you know, in the team sport component. Not to say that wouldn't have been a great path for me, but what I love so much about the golf world and the club specific world is that there's so many businesses underneath one roof,
Mm,
that you've got your marketing, your communications, your finance, your teaching, right? Think about a golf professional or a swim instructor who is teaching children to swim or children how to play golf. There's so many different avenues underneath one roof. And now, from a marketing and communications perspective, as a content creator, like, it's a really cool place to create content, right? There's so
mm.
many fun things that are happening at a golf course or a club, that I'm so happy with the path that I took. But who knows? I could have been working for the Red Sox, if something went differently.
Yeah, you may not have been living in. Well, I suppose yeah, you're living in Boston now. As long as you didn't work for a New York team, you'd still be safe in your humble abode in Boston.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I want to dive in a little bit because you mentioned there through your trajectory, you ended up actually being involved in opening up golf courses. Now that to me seems like quite a complex operation. Like, can you go in maybe to the higher level of like what is involved in opening a golf course?
So that was definitely at the in the early part of my career. I was more on the operational side of it. So I remember very distinctly of, my boss at the time had said, "Hey, we're opening up a golf course in Puerto Rico," which has since recently hosted the Puerto Rican Open, on the PGA Tour, which I think was really cool to see the full kind of life cycle. But
Hmm.
they said, "Hey, like, we're gonna send you down there for 2 weeks. We're not really sure what you'll be doing, but they need all hands on deck." So in the first part of my career, it was say yes to everything. And ultimately, I went down there, and it was everything from, staking out cart paths, to make sure that, because it was a new golf course, so ultimately you couldn't be driving everywhere. So it was, staking the golf course to, you know, ultimately setting up tables for the events that were coming in for the members that were, the founding members. So there was kind of a combination of golf course operations, but then there was also a combination of kind of the hospitality environment. um, Later on in my career, in the operations side of it, before I joined Members First, I remember, our the company that I had worked for, had you know acquired a club out of bankruptcy, and ultimately, when we showed up, there was a big hole in the ground that the previous developer had left. You
Not
know,
ideal.
it was a nice parting gift from that developer. But ultimately, I remember my boss saying at the time, he said, "There's a big hole in the ground now, but we're going to be a part of the team that brings this club to life and puts that huge clubhouse in that hole, and then ultimately we're going to take this club and put it on the map for golf in on the North Shore of Boston." And so, you know, for that part of the operation, it was the golf course had already been built, but the clubhouse hadn't. So we had to put a team together that, you know, you know, was required to purchase everything. I mean, we had overnight rooms. You literally have to go through and select the ironing boards that go into the rooms that people will be staying in.
Mhm.
So, the all the times that you've stayed in a hotel or stayed in a club, think of all the decisions that need to be made to bring that place to life.
Yeah.
And what I found through both of those experiences, whether it's on the golf course or in the club, is that the team that you're working with, you will most likely become best friends with the team that you work so closely with when you are actually building out a club, because you're just in the trenches and ultimately you have no idea what tomorrow will bring. And one day you could be picking out, the ironing boards that go in the hotel rooms, or clearing bush, on the golf course to make sure that the playing conditions are great. So you have to be a very versatile person to, make that exciting. So that's kind of what I've learned, throughout the different, phases of my operations career.
Yeah. And I'd imagine, Sean, that served you very well, given that I guess members first is very much focused on in the name, is like very focused on member experience. And for you to have that know how of what it's like to think about every touch point in the golf club, like you mentioned about the ironing boards, or um you really have to think about all angles when you're launching something, because the first people that walk in, that will be their first experience of the club, right? So um I can imagine that give you a great bit of insight that you've taken into this, because I don't think you're really blindsided by any part of the member experience now, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I think you're correct. You also, what I have found is that you can plan as much as you want, but nothing will ever go perfectly. And so what I think, my club operations experience, that served me well when I joined members first, because you have curveballs thrown at you every day.
Yeah.
I mean, Graham, you're in the process of building your software program now, and no matter how many beta programs that you provide for new products or enhancements to existing products, um, you have to work with a really good client base to think about all variables. But once you launch that product or that new feature to the world and people start using them, whether it's your customers or your customers' customers. So for example, we'll work with our customers to launch, a product or an enhancement, but keep in mind their customers are the members. So
Right.
once they launch it, ultimately, having the feedback from our client base and their client base, the members who are actually using our products, um, is you get a curveball thrown at you all the time. And being able to adapt quickly and realize that things aren't going to be perfect, I think has made our team successful because we listen. We try to understand as much as we can, and I think by doing so, it's made our clients more efficient. And in our world, we try to have our clients look their best, because they're using our products to serve their customers. And so I think that that's really important from our team, and nothing's ever perfect. So
Right.
that's, I think, the one takeaway that I take from operations into kind of software and marketing.
Yeah. The whole time you were describing that, Sean, I thought of the old Mike Tyson saying, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face."
Yes, and I think at every software company, everybody's been punched in the face a couple times,
Right.
and it's kind of how you get up, after that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. And that's it. I think it's a great point you mentioned there on actually listening to what your customers want or what their customers want. I think it's really insightful. But I guess maybe switching it up a little bit. I know you've mentioned there about a few instances where you've traveled with your work. Obviously, Puerto Rico being one of them. Do you want to talk a little bit about like where the world of golf has taken you, and traveling to different places for this game?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's I mean, coming from I'm originally from Broad Albin, New York, which is a small town in New York, upstate, just about probably about 30 miles west of Albany. So um, travel wasn't a big part of my world, and so you know, I was I was very fortunate um, to kind of join that golf development company, which owned properties all over the world. And so at one point, I spent a lot of time on Cape Cod, which is, just south of Boston in Massachusetts. And then from there, I had about 3 days notice, and that company was opening up a golf course in Tucson, Arizona. So I moved from the Northeast to the Southwest, and had my first couple experiences with rattlesnakes and javelinas and coyotes and all the things that happen in the Southwest. So um, I've never I've never been hotter in my life than when I lived in Arizona.
I bet
Um,
it's just
that
that
was an,
dry desert heat probably as well.
exactly, and everybody says it's a dry heat, but ultimately 120 degrees is 120 degrees.
Right.
And the first year that I moved there, we set a record. I think it was 40 days where the temperature never went below 100. So even at night. So
Yeah.
I got a chance to experience the Southwest. From there, I moved back to the East Coast um, to work at a golf course that we were opening up here in Massachusetts. From there, had a couple days notice, and I went on a an interim management position down at the Pompano Beach Club, which was in Bermuda. Which, of course, when they positioned that to me, I said yes. Little did I know that Bermuda is a little bit colder in the winter. But I went down there for a good 6 to 8 months. Got a chance to, um, work at um, a a club down there. However, it wasn't a golf course, so it was a beach club and a small boutique hotel. However, the best part about that, it was located right next to the Port Royal Golf Course, which is on the PGA Tour on the fall
Yeah.
circuit, and that's by far one of my favorite golf courses in the world. Mainly because I got to play it so much. So I spent a little bit of time, had the little bit of the island life,
Nice.
and then I did some interim stints to help open up some golf courses in Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. So I kind of got a little bit of moved a little bit around the United States, spent some time in the Caribbean, and I'm super thankful for that because I got the chance to meet a lot of different people that I've remained very close with throughout my career, and they've helped me out so much as mentors and friends and things like that. But it also gave me the opportunity to work in so many different types of clubs
Hmm.
that I think that you know set me up for success. When now at members first I don't move as much as I used to, but I travel quite a bit. So right now I spend in the last year I've spent a ton of time in down working with a variety of different clubs in Florida, North and South Carolina, the Mid Atlantic around Washington D.C., and then of course everywhere up here in the Northeast. So um, you know travel is a part of my life now, and it's fun. um, However, you have to have a couple travel hacks to make sure that you stay sane on the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd imagine, especially in the early segment of your career there, it was very much kind of like just up sticks and just head off to the other side of the country. I suppose the youth and kind of figuring things out and where you wanted to be, that gives you that flexibility. But obviously we talked pre-podcast, now you're a family man and have daughters, so I'd imagine you can't just disappear as easily.
Uh, yes, sometimes you'd like to disappear as easily as I used to be able to. However, you're absolutely correct. So ultimately, yes, my life has changed, definitely for the better. And my two girls are awesome, but you know, strategically, I've got to coordinate not only my work schedule but my family schedule, and you know, all that really means is those 6 a.m. flights are a little bit easier. but sometimes I've got to get home early because I've got to pick the kids up from school too. So you've got to plan it out a little bit better, and I'm still learning, but I'm getting better at that.
Yeah, yeah, you seem to be making a good job of it, as far as I can tell, Sean. Just on what you touched on in Bermuda, there was the PGA Tour there recently, right? I think I.
Yeah, I think and the last winner was Camilo Villegas, I
Oh yeah,
believe.
that was in the
Eh,
last month or two. I'm nearly sure because Vajegas hadn't won in like I can't
It
remember
was
how.
like it was like 9 years,
That was a long time. Yeah,
and like his story and like his charitable foundation over the last couple of years has been really really interesting, and heartbreaking to follow, but it was really cool to see him hoist that trophy. And and that golf course, just I love watching that tournament, and I love watching because that golf course has changed so much over the last 10 years. And now it's really cool. So each fall, I'll watch the tournament on TV with my daughters, and I always say, I'm like, hey, you see those little pink houses over there? That's where Dad used to live. And so it brings back some really great memories, and you get to watch some really good golf too.
yeah. I remember, and I can't remember if it was the golf course that you're describing, but I remember there was like an exhibition a few years ago, and I think McElroy played in it. And I think it's the 17th hole at that golf course. Is there water down the left hand side, and it's kind of like an up to the green?
Yeah, so they have the two signature holes are the I think it's the 16th. I think it's the 16th hole, the little par three that's like super hard from the back tees. I don't personally play the back tees, so like I have no idea what it would be like that.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, you can see water from I think it's like 14 holes on the golf course.
yeah,
Like it's absolutely amazing. But they used to do, if I remember correctly, they used to do the oh, why am I blanking on the tournament? The tournament where the winners of the four majors used to all
that's
go
it.
together for the exhibition. It
That's
used
it.
to be played at Port Royal, which was
Yeah,
really interesting. I don't think they've played that there in a couple years, but that was
I remember it was just as I was getting into golf actually, and I turned on the TV, and I think it was either 2012 or 2014 whenever McElroy had his run.
mhm.
I think it was maybe 2014 after his two. Yeah, it was 2014 because I think Keimer was playing alongside him as well the year he won the U.S. Open. Um, and it was like I think it was the 17th hole, and he had hit it left, but the ball hadn't went in the water, and he had to flip his club around and hit it left-handed, and he kind of
Oh,
chopped it out and made a whole mess over himself. I
all right.
remember.
So now you've given me after we chat here, I'm gonna have to go down the YouTube rabbit hole and find that one.
Yeah. It's a dangerous game to play. You could be trapped in. You'll be watching Phil Mickelson flop shots for the next 3 hours.
Ex- yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll do that tonight. But to that point though, like a quick conversation brings back such a great memory, right? And I think that the world of golf can like because let's face it, not all of us are professional golfers, right? So we've all had those shots, and it's but what I really find is great about this game and clubs in general is that they're creating memories for their members, and it's really cool to like have people tie that back to your brand,
Mm,
because not too many companies out there can tie it back to their brand. So we I think you and I are pretty lucky to work in an industry that does that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of goes back to what you're saying about your travel has allowed you to meet so many people. And I think I'd imagine for you being in a client facing position that you get to actually almost see the fruits of the labor and what your company is actually bringing to your clubs in reality and the difference it's making. And before we kind of explored a few case studies of things that you're working on with clubs. So do you want to maybe touch on like one or two exceptional things that you've actually seen a real impact from the work you've done in clubs that you're kind of helping at the minute?
Yeah, I mean, you're right where like when I get to travel, I do get to, I'm very lucky where I get to meet a lot of our clients in person, where not everybody at the team at Members First gets to be as client facing as I am. So, there's a lot there, and I'm super proud to represent the team that we have at Members First, because they're the ones that are supporting the clients and they're making them super successful. But there's a lot of people on our team that are behind the scenes, and it's really fun walking into a club, and of course I get introduced to them, I take a tour, And it is awesome when a client says, "Hey, I love working with Jen or Janet or John or Jason or any of the other like client services teams or the people who are, working with them on a day-to-day basis." That's a win in my book when they mention when they have a relationship with our team that hasn't been one to one as far as like in person, right? And
Right.
so you had mentioned about like different case studies and that we've done here at Members First, and I think that like our products and services at Members First have evolved based off of what our clients need. So, one of the things that we do at Members First, we do a lot of marketing services for clubs. And people will think, ooh, marketing services, some clubs can do it and some clubs can't do it. But in reality, everybody's marketing, right? Whether you're showcasing an experience or not, you might not be advertising for new members or saying, hey, come have your wedding at our club. You might not be taking that approach, but everybody has a form of marketing and a form of communications that are happening at any business. And so, you know, we still do this, but our marketing services department, we help clients generate leads, right? Kind of draw people to their brand and their product. Um, Once we help them generate leads, we have to help them manage leads, right? As new members come in. Um, and then one of our products and services that we've kind of created over time is that if we were helping people generate leads or interest in their club, we were helping them manage leads, so that they can properly provide the right data and touch points from a communication standpoint. And then that evolved into how do we help people onboard new members? And so it was a natural progression of our marketing services department where we went from generating leads to managing them all the way to helping them onboard. And we relate this to, I mean, just like teaching a child to swim, right? You don't just, they get excited that they're going to the pool, right? But you don't just throw them in the pool and hope that they swim. And what we were finding is that a lot of our clients were having members join the club. They were doing their normal orientations, which is, here are the rules. This is what you can and you can't do. It's kind of very structured. But ultimately, they weren't onboarding them in a way that helps those members become really engaged in their communities and become great members.
Mm.
And that could be everything from making sure a new member is, you know, connects with other members who have similar interests, right? So if I graduated from Western New England University, can you pair me up with other people who have done that? Or if you know that I'm from New York and I'm a Yankees fan, but I'm living in Fort Myers, which is primarily Boston South, right? The Red Sox spring training is there. Can you pair me up with other Yankees fans so that I can compete against the Red Sox fans that are there? So our clubs know so much about their members and their customers, but what we found is that they weren't using technology to help with the automation. They were trying to do everything manually.
Mm.
And so our marketing services department kind of onboarded items and used that way to help save time for our membership and marketing directors. And that ultimately helped us and helped our clients engage with their members in a much cleaner way. And it's been really cool to see the engagement rates and the data behind it because, our onboarding statistics, like, you know, imagine sending an email out to your customer or your members and having a 95 plus engagement rate with it.
Mm.
Like that's
Yeah.
unheard of. And so it's a really, we're working with a number of clubs right now to help them with their onboarding, and it's cool to see it working, right? Because you
Mm.
just never know how a product is going to work until you put it out into the marketplace. And the natural progression of our marketing services has really been helping clubs be as efficient as they can using technology.
Yeah, and I can see the challenge there for an average member club because if you're trying to remember what your 300 members preferences are all at the same time and then try to like manually match make them to create the community feel, it's going to be a lot of info in their head, right?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, at least for me when I joined the club, I think the most important part for me was feeling like I had people who kind of understood me or had similar interests to me and had like a solid four ball to go out and play with every Saturday morning. Those are the things that would make me, want to return, and it also makes like I guess if you're a new member, you might face a degree of like not anxiety, but like you're trying to fit in essentially with a group that is already established, right? So
Mhm.
I can certainly understand where the challenge would be from the club there, and ultimately you're just softening that blow in the members to say, hey, we've got this figured out for you already. You're just
Yeah.
welcome to come in and
There's
join.
and you know the and we work a lot, of course, with all department heads at clubs, whether it's the golf professional, general manager, food and beverage, membership marketing, rackets professionals and things like that. And there was one department head that um, her name's Sandra, and she works at Nashotah Country Club, which is here in just based out of Boston. And the club is really great. I mean, they've hosted, senior PGA Tour events and a variety of different things there. So it's like a world class golf course, but an unbelievable staff. And Sandra always told me, she, as the membership director, I was like, she said, my job, she goes, I am this new member's first best friend because they know so much about that new member. However, that member, if they're going to be at the club for on average 8, 10 years, ultimately that member's friend network is going to be there at the club. And so it always stuck with me how she said that her role was to be that new member's best friend and connect them with other friends. Because let's face it, Graham, is as you and I get older, right, it's easy to make friends when you're kids, sort of, right?
Yeah,
But
no, I would.
as you get older, it is harder to find friends. Not find friends, but ultimately make friends that you connect with because there's so many different things that you have going on in your life. If the onboarding process at a club can introduce you to a friend network that you didn't weren't aware of. I think that that's a win-win, and that is an engaged member, and that's what we want, right? I mean, that's what all businesses want. You want engaged customers, and I think that that's a win-win.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'd say a lot of clubs. I guess going back to myself a little bit, but I built an online community during COVID. It was actually for caddies to kind of share their story of basically what they were doing because there was no real caddying going on in the world during that time. And what I learned through doing that was if you're actually much better getting 10 really engaged people on a site or in your club that like truly care rather than 1,000 people who are they don't feel part of anything because then if you get the 10 really interested then natural referrals come from that. People feel inclined to share the message to say I feel really noticed, I feel really cared about in this community, and it seems like that's kind of what you're fostering there is like,
Mhm.
and Sandra seems to have hit the nail on the head of like being that person's best friend starting off. I think that's a really cool message.
Yeah, and like you had mentioned, like having like that small group of people, those 10 people, that like amplifying the message is really important. And I like to say that your best members will be your best employees too, right? And so, we've I was on a call with a club yesterday, and Members First has besides all of our other products and services that we have a mobile application, right? That members will use, download. That's how they'll interact with the club. That's how they'll make their reservations. It's how they'll see what's going on. It's how they plan their days and their weeks and all those things. And the club that I was talking to was like, yeah, you know what, our members just haven't downloaded the app. And I was like, well, let's talk about how did you introduce it to them, right? Did you just say, hey, here's a new toy, please go download it, and then potentially never follow up, never onboard, never provide them with really great content? And this happens quite a bit. But when I have when I've worked with clubs in the past that have a really great strategy, what they tend to do is that they one train their team on how to use the products and services. But if you want somebody to download your mobile app, imagine the power that is that the power that happens when a member turns to another member and says, hey, look at this app, here's all the things you can and can't do, and the member is actually encouraging the other member to take
Mm.
advantage of a communications platform that the club has installed. So when we're helping clubs out with their marketing and internal, whether it's member to member communications, it's not just about the products and the services, it's how do you help people get the most out of it? And if you can have your club members almost be your voice to the membership, that is that's huge. And I think that that comes from the relationships that the department heads have with their customers.
Totally. Yeah, and that is the best testament to a product. If a user refers it to someone else, that means
Oh,
you've nailed it. And it's yeah, it's such a great feeling.
mhm.
Sean, I know we could talk forever here and nerd out about tech and marketing tactics, and you've dropped a lot of golden nuggets there that I'm sure a lot of our viewers will find really interesting. I know in recent weeks you have done a few webinars, kind of highlighting maybe a few similar tactics that you mentioned there. Just as a kind of penultimate point, do you want to maybe touch on, what got you into webinars and what kind of stuff you actually talk about in these?
Yeah, I mean, at Members First, we take a, I mean, we do take an education first approach when we are trying to help people learn about how to be more efficient in their day-to-day lives. It could be, recently we've provided some content as to how to break down silos at clubs. For example, how does the one of my favorite education events that we've done is how three teams work together, right? It's how the golf professional, uses the members first tee sheet to work with the communications director to communicate information correctly and timely in a way that looks great to the members. And then how does that carry into working with the CFO, how you're tying all the different products and services together. And so, we like to take the approach uh, of of really helping people get the most out of the products and services that we provide, but we we try to, and we're always trying to improve, but we try to make sure that we're educating people on strategy. And if you happen to use our products and services, awesome. You'll probably be able to implement that strategy a lot quicker. But really, it doesn't matter which product and services that you're using. If you don't have a strategy in place, they won't be successful. And so, what we do with a lot of our education is try to generate ideas as to how you can communicate better with your customers. So, for example, we did a um, last week or 2 weeks ago now. They're all blurring together. But I joined
A year
my
with bubblers in together.
yeah, exactly. I joined we had two back-to-back days. The first one was a virtual holiday party that our friend Shanna Bright from Private Clubs Online, she used to do this annually. And this year she brought in, we've collaborated with her. She focuses on a lot of private club communications and recruitment for positions in that world. And so we collaborated with her on a bunch of content this year. But we said, hey, we're going to have a virtual holiday party. So we brought in our friend Denny Corby from Private Club Radio. We brought in Lynn LaFon DeLuca from the Association of Catering and Event Professionals. We brought in our marketing manager, Victoria Burns, one of my colleagues, Katie Mason. And we just literally talked about our top 5 ideas that clubs are implementing in the marketing and communication space. So that was really fun because we just did a rapid fire countdown, and talking about everything from really fun events at clubs, to how to strategically use your website to recruit and retain great employees. Because let's face it, you could have the greatest club in the world, but if you don't have employees to serve those members, it doesn't really work.
Right.
So that was one of the things that we focused on in the last couple weeks, and we followed that up with I joined Melissa Hansen, who's the director of sales and marketing at the club at Old Cypress in Naples. I joined her and a friend of ours, Rick Coffey from NBC. Um, he works at the Sport Next component, and we recapped a club and resort membership and marketing webinar series that we did back in November. And the content that we were covering there was anything about how to get the most out of social media at your club, to how to use automation from a technology perspective to be a little bit more efficient in your day-to-day job. And then um and then Rick is great because Rick went through his top 30 sales tips, like how to be a better membership marketing club sales professional,
Hmm.
because let's face it, like clubs don't exist without members, and ultimately you need people to help bring in the next wave of members. Um, whether you're bringing in 10 members a year or 70 members a year, you still need that person. So he went through a variety of different ways to help those membership and marketing sales professionals be a little bit more um, productive in what they do. So it was a really fun collaborative week with so many different people, so many different opinions, so many different voices, and we actually had the highest registration and attendance rate.
There
Like
you
we
go.
had, I think it was close to like a 70% attendance rate, which is
Crazy.
unheard of in a virtual education environment. So we were super happy with that, and it's fun to see clients reach out and say thank you for that type of content.
Yeah, and it seems, I mean, you've rhymed off at least half a dozen names there, and it seems like they're just sit as a stack of value. Like as you say, even if a club doesn't go with you, but it's just that consultative approach to say, I've turned up to this webinar, but I leave better informed, knowing I have one or two ideas to maybe get my next 10 members or to help retain members or to help people feel more involved. So yeah, it sounds super useful, and I think you've inspired me to maybe a few little webinar ideas I have of my own as well. So
And
the
maybe next year we'll get you in on the holiday party fun. Get time zone will be a little bit different, but it'll span from where you are to us in Boston, all the way out to we had a couple people from the West Coast join in. So who knows? Maybe we'll tap you and see if you want to join in on some of those events.
Yeah. Well, that's it. You said before the podcast that you'd had an idea for me, so I've had a few ideas of my own there. So and honestly, this is why I do the podcast as well. Like it's so fun to pick insightful people's brains who know their stuff about the industry, and for me to learn new things as well. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers really appreciate it, Sean. So maybe just before we go off here, is there anywhere where someone can check out, members first online? Is just your website?
Um, yeah, I mean, website's full of content, and that's just membersfirst.com. It's a great way to find information about us. As you're checking out our products and services that we provide, do me a favor and jump over to our team page, because those are the people that make Members First so successful. And if you look at our team page, you could see how much fun we have at Members First. So that's a great way to kind of find a little bit more about us. But the other way I would say is, connect with us on LinkedIn. Whether it's following the Members First LinkedIn page, we're always providing incredible content, and our education team is, I think, one of the best in the industry, and they're providing different ways for people to use software and have it be fun and have it be engaging with clients. So LinkedIn is usually where we spend a lot of our content, and of course you can always find me on LinkedIn as well. That's I think, Graham, that's how you and I first connected, so it
Absolutely.
works, right?
Yeah, the place of origin. Exactly. So, but yeah, listen, Sean, thank you so much for your time. Super insightful to speak to you and kind of sponge off your knowledge. And yeah, looking forward to some more conversations in the future. But for now, have a great rest of your 2023. I think you may be the final guest of this year, actually.
Ooh,
So there you go. It'll probably go out in the new year, but we're finishing on a high. So thanks again, Sean.
you're welcome, Graham, and I look forward to seeing what you do in 2024.
Awesome.